Happy Sabbath, everybody. We're really happy to have you here. If you're visiting, if this is your first time here, welcome. We're glad you're here with us. Welcome to all those on the live stream. Lana and Paul, if you're watching, welcome to you. Welcome to Mom and Dad and anybody else who may be on the stream today, whoever that may be. And we just hope that today is a day that is profitable and that we can rejoice in it as this is the day that the Lord made. I am looking for my notes, y'all. I know they're on here somewhere. I apologize. We've had some, here they are. Had a little bit of technical glitches today, all the way around. Okay, so if you've been with us the last few times I've spoken, we've been talking about the Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes. I find this really interesting that, so completely apart from this, the Bible Project is doing a year-long survey of the Sermon on the Mount. I don't know, I do know exactly how I ended up with this. Just a little bit of inside baseball, I guess, if you are interested in it. When I was seeking the Lord several months back on what the message was to be, I'd read a study that had given the definition of the word Makarios, which is the one that said, "The blessed are you." That blessed word that we see in all the Beatitudes, it's the study was essentially to show the greater depth of that, to show that it doesn't just mean blessed, like in a exchange sort of way. If you do this, you will receive this. It's more of a thing to explain what the lifestyle of someone will look like. You will be truly content if and when you implement these aspects of kingdom living into your life. And it's not just a matter of implementing it because I decide to do it. It becomes a matter of, wow, these things are all completely unobtainable from a human level. We need God to help us to accomplish them. And so as I was studying this study on the Makarios, I just kind of was dwelling and meditating on that word. And I guess as it pertains to the Sermon on the Mount, I guess it's sometime back in December. And so I came out, I think it was December. And so I decided to do a thing on the Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes, and that has blossomed into now what will be a 5 sermon series on the Beatitudes themselves, and then God willing, we will maybe keep going on the Sermon on the Mount. But I find it really interesting that is where God led me through one way or another, and then we see also that the Bible Project is dedicating their entire year to this. So I think there's something in this sermon that maybe we've ignored for too long or taken just little bits and pieces and tried to make sense of it. Taken as a whole, the Sermon on the Mount is it's basically the very basic requirements for the Christian. And I say very basic. They're so far from basic teachings. These are groundbreaking, profound, impossible. This is where Jesus, part of where he comes in and begins to take what the rote word said, that you shall, keep these commandments and you shall do the 618 or 613 laws or whatever it is that the Sanhedrin had been instructing the Jews to do. And he's saying, no, this is a bigger and better way. This is a deeper, this is a much harder way, but this is the way of the kingdom of heaven. And so if you wanted to, I would like to just suggest that if you would like and enjoying this topic, whether you're enjoying it or not is really irrelevant. It's sort of kind of like Christianity 101, so I hope it's making it enjoyable. But I would just highly suggest that you also give a parallel listen to the Bible Project. I think they're on episode 5 or 6 right now, and they'll be coming out throughout the year. And if you get their app, this is a shameless plug for which I get nothing in return, but if you get their app, it has a really nice little interactive thing where as you listen, the scriptures kind of automatically scroll through, little multimedia things pop up. It's a really kind of interactive experience rather than just listening to a podcast or a sermon. So just wanted to put that out there. Now, just as a quick recap, every sermon I've recapped the ones we've done prior, but I want to look at the composite of what it is that we have looked at so far. You start with poor in spirit. The kingdom of heaven belongs to them. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Poor in spirit essentially means humble. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. This is not those who mourn because they lost somebody, although that's certainly part and parcel. Jesus mourned when Lazarus was lost. Jesus mourned whenever things happened because he understood what it was now to the human condition in a sense, but also because it's heartbreaking to as you identify with your fellow human to see what happens. But that is not the mourning necessarily being talked about here. It's a mourning for who I have been, who I am before a holy and living God and what the world is, and we say, oh man, this is unfortunate. This does not measure up. We mourn and we grieve over this. We grieve because of the sin that we see all around us, and including in our own lives. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. The meek, these are the people who are nobodies, the unimportant, those who sort of have recognized in their own life, based on who I am, being humble and mourning for the sin around me, who am I that anyone can do anything through me at all, that God can work with me? And so in these first three, of course, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. But in these first three, we become highly aware of our own needs. We are bankrupt without the grace of God in our life. We are bankrupt. And when we are poor in spirit, when we're humble, when we mourn because of that, the sin that we see in us and around us, and when we become so aware of that we recognize ourselves as unimportant nobodies, which kind of dovetails with the humility, well, we're in a place God can work with us, and we establish that we are empty and we have a need. And so we come to Beatitude number 4, where we hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. This is where God begins to take this empty vessel and fill us with the things of himself, where he begins to fill us with the Spirit, where he begins to fill us with joy, where he begins to fill us with substantive things so that we're not walking through life feeling spiritually empty. Or so we're not walking through life seeking things that will not fill us up, where we hunger and thirst for righteousness. Righteousness is the only thing that can satisfy. And so we walk through life looking to fill the need that we have. And when you hunger and thirst for righteousness, God promises that you will be filled. He will not leave you hungering or thirsting when that is what you hunger and thirst for. When you've become filled, you realize that you're empty and you become filled, then the next few become about who we become, because God has come and filled us, and so we become merciful. Why merciful? Because in order to receive God's mercy for the things that we have done, that we've become aware of, that we mourn over, and that He has filled us up, we now recognize that we can extend mercy to our fellow man. Because we have the heart of God in us, working in us. We don't have the heart of God. We have God working in our hearts, rather, to cause us to extend mercy to others. And the merciful shall receive mercy. And then you have pure in heart. This is what we talked about last time. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Seeing God, you'll recall, if you weren't here last week, seeing God is essentially the sum total of all religions. It's the end goal of what we're doing here at all. Really, what any religion is doing is the goal is to see God, to meet God. And how can you do it if you're not pure in heart? And so, as we talked about last week, can we tell ourselves, hey, Justin, hey, put your name here. Hey, Jim, hey, Jamie, hey, Jessica, hey, other J names. I guess other names. There's so many J names, y'all. I wasn't doing that intentionally. Hey, Eric. Hey, Dan. There you go. Can you tell yourself, you, Dan, you, April, become poor in heart, poor in spirit, become mournful, become meek, be filled, hunger and thirst for righteousness. Just hunger and thirst for righteousness. Tell it to yourself over and over. Tell yourself, I'll become more merciful. Tell yourself to become pure in heart. It doesn't work. You can't come by that on your own will or power. You can't arrive there. And so we come to understand that this is something that only God can do as He works through us in His Spirit. This is not a man-made work. This is something that sets the Christian apart from the world. We can't possibly do this of our own. We can't possibly do this by heavy lifting or by willing ourselves to do it or by white-knuckling it. It is strictly through submission and acceptance of the gift that God gives us as He works in us and through us. And it's a lifetime of effort in submission to that. The only thing we can really do is submit to God and choose to obey and constantly pursue Him. These are not a list that you work through them and I've accomplished number one. I've become poor in spirit, I've become humble, so therefore I can move on to mourner and then move on to meek. No, while there is an order to them, certainly in their groupings. Each of these are ongoing works in our lives. We wake up each day and say, oh man, I am hopefully waking up and choosing to be humble today, imploring God for the humility that I require in order to get through this day. And may I be deeply affected by the sin that I see around me, not callous to it, not becoming used to it, but may I become deeply affected by it, mournful of it as I see it in myself, as I see it in others. And may I choose to become a nobody in the sight of others. May I choose not to become desirous of being high and lifted up. May I become a nobody, and may I be just grateful for whatever God gives me to do today. And then may I please be filled, God. Please fill me with your righteousness today. And may I become merciful and extend it out to others, and may I be pure in heart. This is sort of the, a really good prayer to pray in the morning. I can't say I do this very well every day, but I would suspect that because this is an ongoing thing, these are good things to ask God for help on, because we can't do it on our own. And so we come to verse 9 that says this: blessed or contented or happy are they, or truly happy will be you if you are a peacemaker, for they shall be called sons of God. We all sort of know this already, but what did the Jews of the day think that the Messiah would be? They knew the scriptures, but who did they presume that the Messiah would be, either through misinterpreting the scriptures or just sort of having the wrong word picture in their head of what the scriptures were indicating? Who did they think he would be? Yes, absolutely, a conquering king. And furthermore, he was going to come and deliver them from the physical occupation of Rome. What Jesus is doing is he declares this to all of the people who are before him, who are saying, the murmuring among the crowd surely was, could this be him? Could this be the Messiah? Oh, that's him. No, that's not him at all. You have these different people coming from different angles and different expectations, but so many of them probably had this background where they expected the Messiah to be a conquering king. And Jesus is in this setting. He says, no, that's not what I'm about. I'm about being a peacemaker, and that's who follows me will also be about making peace. That's supported in John 18:36 too, where he's essentially answering this question, where he says, to answering someone's question, he says, my kingdom's not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight so that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now, my kingdom is not from here. Embedded in this statement, or these statements really, is an implication that the world is characterized by physical wars and a lack of peace. That's very obvious. That's the world we know and live in. It's characterized by a lack of peace and physical wars. But why? And why, if we're expected to be come in and be peaceful, the implication is that we would be living in a world without peace, and so we are to bring peace to it. To do that, we need to understand why and where war comes from. And James talks about this brilliantly and succinctly. But going over to James 1, scriptures we're all familiar with. James 1, James 4. I had a 20% chance of getting that one right, and I missed it. Where do wars and fights come from among you? Do they not come from your desires for pleasure that war in your members? You lust and you don't have. You murder and covet and cannot obtain. You fight and you war. Yet you do not have because you do not ask. You ask and do not receive because you ask amiss, that you may spend it on your pleasures. For where envy and self-seeking exist, confusion and every evil thing are there. War and the things that come with it, basically a lack of peace, it comes from when we are focused on self and selfishness. Not selflessness, but selfishness, where we are focused on our own desires. James says when we're focused on our own lusts. And so we fight to get what we desire, be it through just taking it from someone, desiring what somebody else has, or through fighting to take it in legal means or illegal means. But we fight to get what we desire, consequences aside, and we envy the success, maybe deserved or undeserved, of another, or another political party, or whatever it is, but we war and we battle and we fight, and we come up against one another, and we desire even, and this one may not sound so bad as that, but we desire what is just and fair for ourselves. That's not so bad, right? To desire what is fair and just for our own selves. God's put a sense of justice in us, has he not? But so often what we do is we get into this place where we desire what is just and fair for ourselves, and we go to pursue that regardless of the consequences on what that has on others. It may not be fair to us, but sometimes the peaceable route requires us to lay down what is just and what is fair for ourselves. And that is where we transpose ourselves from something that we can accomplish physically into something that God has to work in us. It's really in all of these desires, lusts, in a heart that wants to fight to get what we deserve, envy. But then when you get into the more subtle ones, like desiring what's just and fair, are we willing to lay that down? Can we lay that down if that's what's standing in our way of being peaceable, I should say? Now, this will always be the condition of man and the condition of the world until all come to the knowledge of the Lord, until all come to know who he is, until all come to submit to Christ and to his way. And this is the heart of the unconverted man. It's a conflict-driven heart, one that is constantly warring, that is constantly going up against things. And society really rewards this way of thinking. If you've ever seen a television show, you know that they go out of their way to create the drama in the television show. You create the conflict, and the conflict gets resolved, but it usually gets resolved through violence. Usually gets resolved through ways besides the protagonist being wronged and letting that wrong stay. It usually gets resolved in ways other than the protagonist sacrificing his desires or her desires and wills in fairness. And in fact, usually it stokes up drama and conflict. It's not on the air anymore, and we're really glad about that. But if you've ever seen an episode of Jerry Springer, you can know how that goes. It's like he brings out two people that hate each other, and he's like, here's a knife, do something with it. And on public TV, society encourages us to go at each other's throats, to take the success, to take the money, to take the fame, whatever it is. Peace is something that councils can go after, NATO can go after, UN can attempt to go after. All these organizations can try for, and they can put in rules and statutes and things that try to regulate peace. But at the end of the day, none of that will ever change the heart of man. The heart of man desperately wants for itself. James makes that so clear in the passage we just read. But Jesus is asking, and the Christ follower, and requiring actually of the Christ follower to be different. The Christ follower pursues peace. And so I want to spend, I guess, the rest of our time talking about what does this character look like in a person. The first one is really simple. The person who's the peacemaker, well, he himself is first peaceable. You have to actually have a sense of peace and a heart filled with peace in order to go on your way to spread peace. You kind of have to understand it in order to go out to teach it. You have to experience it in order to be able to pass it along to others. And so in that, we have to expect that God will come into our hearts to change us. In Hebrew, this has a word. You'll recall that in Isaiah 9:6, Jesus is being prophesied of. It's the coming of, this is the passage that talks about Emmanuel, the king to come. And it defines him as, I think it's the manual passage, but it says that he is the Prince of Peace. The Messiah to come is a Prince of Peace. Now, you would think maybe that some of the Jews, and maybe some of them did, but the ones who expected the Messiah to come and deliver them from Rome Well, why would he be the one? He's defined as the Prince of Peace. He's not going to be the one to come and violently overthrow Rome. This word peace in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew, the word is shalom. Now, we're all familiar with this word. We've heard it a lot. But I want to try to communicate the sense of it, because just saying peace in English doesn't really capture what that's about. If you read Genesis 43, this is when they're asking about, when Joseph is asking about the health of his father to his brothers who are unsuspecting in Egypt. And he asked them, and it says in Genesis 43, 27 and 28, he says, then he asked them about their well-being and said, is your father well? And the old man of whom you spoke, is he still alive? And they answered, your servant, our father, is in good health. He's still alive. So I said, well-being, well, and good health. This is all shalom. And when someone says in Hebrew, shalom, or shalom be with you, peace be with you, what they're saying, the sense that the word really kind of underscores, is may health and prosperity and peace of mind and peace of spirit be upon you. It's not just a wish for peace and happiness. The word suggests a state of fullness and perfection. It's a really robust word. It's not just when you compare that and we go through these definitions, it means so much more than just peace as we understand it, like a lack of war. The word suggests a state of fullness and perfection, overflowing inner and outer joy and peaceful serenity. And Jesus is not just asking us to behave this way. He is actively showing us, actually in the New Testament passages, that this is overcomable. Now, how can I say that? Let's talk about one of his disciples, or apostles, actually. Who was Simon? There was Simon Peter, and there was another Simon. There was Simon Zealot. What's Simon Zealot? A zealot is not a last name. I think you all know that. A zealot was a political movement at the time of the Roman occupation within the Hebrews. It was a sect. And the whole purpose of the movement was to incite the people to rebel against the Romans. It was to stir up something opposite of peace, to expel it by means of war, actually. And within the Zealots, there was another sect of people called the Sicarii. What are those? The Sicarii are actually, before there were assassins, before there were samurai, before there were the ninjas of, if you study the ancient Japanese culture, before all that, before there was the Sicarii. They were the ones that means, the word literally means dagger man is what it literally translates to. They were the assassins of their day. They had daggers in their cloaks, and the idea was in crowds, you would quickly shank the Romans, put it back in your cloak, and disappear. And that was the idea. You were to stir up war, you were to stir up murder and hatred in order to essentially get the Romans out. We don't see that character demonstrated in Simon Zealot, do we? This is who Jesus called, and this is who he became, and the thing in between the two was the man of Jesus, who was able to take someone through his example and through his working and through the working of the Spirit that was eventually given to them at Pentecost. This is a changed person. This is a man, I don't know if he was Sicarii or not, but he was certainly a zealot. And he came out changed. The warlike tendencies, the tendencies to implement disorder and chaos by waging war and covert means on the Romans, gone. Now, maybe he still struggled with that a little bit, but he was following something bigger and deeper and greater than him. He had found the kingdom of heaven come near to him in the form of Jesus, and he says, this is greater. This is not worth trifling over human political matters. I found someone and something greater than that. And that's what Jesus is calling us to as well. Yes, we make a difference for the better in our lives and our communities around us. We're instructed in the Bible to actually pray for our communities, to be a blessing to our communities. We vote. We we ask and pray that God would be the one to lead us to do the right thing and give us the right leaders. We pray for our leaders. We are good citizens, but yet there's a higher citizenship. And when we come near to God, we see the kingdom of heaven supersedes all the stuff on earth. And when we compare the stuff on earth that we see up against the kingdom of heaven, we realize one is so much better than the other. I think God's doing something. I know God's doing something, but I think God's doing something specifically in politics these days. If you follow it at all, things have gotten so absurd, so insane. I think that's why and what's going to come of it is a different thing. But for me, what's happened in that, some of the thing that's happened in that is it's become very easy for me now to start divorcing my patriotism for the country I live in from the kingdom of heaven. They used to be, somewhere in here or some maybe even out of balance, but now it's becoming easier and easier and easier to say, this is not fixable. We can put Band-Aids on it. We can do our best to pray for our leaders. We can do things that will certainly remedy things for the time being, but it's such a disastrous mess. The only thing that can fix this is the kingdom of heaven. I don't know if anyone else feels that way. That's sort of where I'm becoming. And so we become more focused on the kingdom of heaven, and the things that flow out of that include peaceability. We're no longer wanting to necessarily struggle and fight for the kingdoms of this earth so much as we want to spread the peace and the goodwill as ambassadors of the kingdom of heaven. But that's hard in practice, right? It's easier said than done. So yes, this requires a new outlook and a new heart to become from those who are focused on the kingdoms or the politics of this day, like Simon Zealot was, to become focused upward and on the kingdom, upward and on the kingdom of heaven, upward on the reward that is to come to us at Jesus' return. Jesus was the ultimate demonstration of this. I mentioned earlier about what was fair and what was right. That sometimes we can hold on to what is fair and just, and that's a little bit maybe more subtle than saying, I just want to overtly argue with someone about something. We hold on to what is fair and just to us. Let me ask you, was anything fair and just about what Jesus went through at the cross? In no way. And yet he did it joyously for the joy that was set before him so that we could be redeemed. This is where it gets impossible for humans. There is nothing we can do save for the grace of God as he works through us in his Spirit to have hearts that work like this. So we move from a war-inclined heart of believing that we deserve this or that, and into getting what we think is fair in this life, to a heart that recognizes the only thing that we deserve is death. But we've been redeemed from that. You also notice that some of the prerequisites for this, to arrive at that conclusion, are that we be meek and that we mourn in order to arrive at this conclusion, that we deserve nothing more than death. And so what can I do to extend the grace of my Savior and to extend the love that he had for me to others? And the answer is to extend mercy and to extend peace. All right, so point two of, actually I want to tell a story about that. So we become a peaceable person. Now, each of us are going to be more naturally inclined towards what would be the ability, I guess, to just interact with one another, either peacefully or more peacefully. I've spent a lot of my time in life really liking conflict of sorts because I like to debate. Some people have like a more lawyerly, is that a word? Whatever. They like to debate. There's like joy in that, and that is a legitimate activity to be able to have debates, to arrive at conclusions, but there's ways to do it peaceably. There's others who are more naturally peaceable, but I'm talking about the peace that transcends all understanding and joy. This has happened to me a few times in my life. One story I've shared with some of you all before, but I'll share this. Back when Liz and I lived in town, we had a house in Carrollton. Now, if you live in Carrollton, really lots of areas Metroplex, but if you live in Carrollton especially, you're going to have foundation problems. That's the way it's going to be in Carrollton for you, I'm afraid. And our house was specifically set up by whoever designed it and had worked on it to have all the foundation problems, because it was on the side of a hill, and it had a reverse grade coming down, and water would come down, and there was no drainage away from the house. It drained in towards the house, and we had bought it from someone who had flipped it. Nobody had been living in it, and we bought it during like the driest summer, almost on record. And so nobody had been living in it. Nobody had been using the drains or the pipes, and it had been kind of covered up. The people who had flipped the house made it look kind of nice. So once we started living in it and using the drain lines and stuff again, well, we started getting pops and creaks. And then without anything's help, the kitchen floor started to swell. And it started to swell along the length of the kitchen floor. And then I'd be laying in bed and I'd hear pop in the attic, and I'm like, oh, no, the house isn't haunted. It's just literally tearing itself apart. And then you would hear a window break in our front room. This actually happened. I'm like, nope, it's not a thief. Not a vandal. It's the house shifting so drastically it blew out a window. And so my place of peace, my home of respite from the world, that I get off work and I want to come back to a place that doesn't want to try to kill me, is trying to kill me and kill my finances. It's trying to literally make me broke. And so we were blessed by God to get a good insurance claim on that. It was actually kind of a cool story. I'd called the insurance company and be like, hey, look, we got drain lines that are completely rusted out. This is what's causing the heave, by the way, in the foundation. All the drainage that coming from our drains is now under our house in part. So it's causing the soil to heave and shift. And they're like, oh, sorry, we don't cover broken drains. I'm like, well, it backed up and I guess it caused a little rot in my cabinet, which cost $100 to fix. And they're like, okay, well, that triggers a claim for everything. So God completely provided in the 5 figures for that, because just I happened to mention that, not knowing anything that would cause anything. He was very good to take care of us for that. But the next test was this. We had the people out there digging, and they were busting holes through our foundation with slabs, and our whole house is ripped apart and torn up. Very high-stress environment. And they get under there, and they've done their estimates, and they're like, okay, well, we were digging under the house, and they're tunneling under there. They have big 3-foot by 3-foot tunnels going all under our house. And they say, hey, by the way, we estimated it would go to this part, but we can't find good pipe to clamp onto the new stuff. It's all rotten. So we got to keep going. And by the way, it's $300 a foot for every where that we tunnel. And so they need to go another 9 feet. They need to go another 3 feet. They need to go. And so the money just is like, we're pulling our hair out saying, where's this money going to come from? We've used up our claim. And we feel like the management is doing us dirty, that they're misleading us, and that they're kind of like the used car mechanics of pipe fixing. And we're just pulling out our hair and stressed out about it. And we kind of came to the place where we were so angry and disgusted by the whole situation that we had nothing else to do except for Liz and I fell down on our knees and took it to God in prayer with this big burden on us. And I attest to you that as we prayed and gave this burden over to God, it was like we felt the whole thing lifted off our back. And I don't mean to say like we felt something literally lift off our back, but we felt the burden go away and just evaporate. Praise God for that, because that's the answer to prayer, and that is the sense of peace that surpasses all understanding that He gives us. This is how I experienced peace through God's divine intervention in one of the times of my life. And this is nothing that we can will ourselves to have. In that time, I was wanting, I think in my better moments, I was saying, be more peaceful about this, be more reasonable about this, don't be angry at the construction workers. In all the things that I know I'm supposed to be acting like. But the only way we actually ended up arriving there was by taking it to God, desperately saying, I got nothing. There's nothing I can do. Please take this from me. And He was faithful to do so. God is good to provide us peace so that we can become peaceable, so that what? We can just sit on it? No, so that we can also take it to others. So that we can minister to others in their needs. We can pray with others in their needs. We can explain the mechanism how at least it works for some of us when God takes a huge burden off of us and does away with it. Because there are people out there who have no peace, and they need God's peace. And so that comes to point number 2 of like, what does it look like? What does this character look like in a man or a woman in real life? The first we just talked about is that he himself is peaceable. The second is this, that we're not just content to have peace in our own life. There's an action involved. This man or woman is the one who actively makes and pursues peace on behalf and in the lives of others. The Christian desires to make peace. He doesn't speak ill of another person, even if they're in sin, even if they've done something against them, because when we speak that ill against somebody, that informs even our own opinion of them. And it certainly, as the words go out, inform other people's opinion of them. And once the words are out, it's harder to get them back in and stuff them in the bottle so that peace can be had, either between people, and especially when it's between people or among people. So the Christian who desires to make peace doesn't speak ill of a brother. The Christian who desires peace desires to bring a divine peace to someone so that they don't have to strive for peace. And sometimes I think we think that creating peace is like this passive action. And different families do this in different ways. Some families are if there's a problem, they are going to one another immediately to talk about the problem. Maybe too soon sometimes. That's my thing, is if there's a problem, I'm going to talk about it really fast. And that can be problematic in its own right. But there's other families who will, if there's a problem, they won't talk about it at all. They'll let it build, and they'll let it build, and they'll let it build, and let it build until something eventually ruptures and explodes over. But so often the reason they let it build is because they want to keep the peace, or what they are defining as peace. They're happy and content to let sleeping dogs lie, basically. So when we go out to generate and create peace towards others, it doesn't mean it in that sense, that we're just to allow sleeping dogs to lie, that we're to be passive about it. Like love is best demonstrated through action, not just talking about love, not just through an emotion or a feeling. Love is best demonstrated through action. And so is peace. So we become active in controlling our tongue. We become active in ruling over our heart's desire and suppressing them. And again, we've already talked about how we can only do that so far. God has to do the rest for us. We have to work in conjunction with God so that being open and honest with Him where we are. God, my heart is inclined towards this. I need your help. You have to take it from me. God, I am not peaceable about this. God, I'm stressed about the state of this country and where it's going. I need you to take that from me. I need your help. I can't fix it by worrying about it. Jesus tells us that. What is it we can fix by worrying about it? We can't grow hair on our head. We can't make ourselves taller. We can't make ourselves anything by worrying about it. All we can do is actually harm ourselves through worry, through a lack of the sense of peace and wholeness. And so we become active in ruling over our desires and expressing them, active in routing out the sources of disagreement in people's lives, or the sources of disagreement where they don't have peace with the Lord, or maybe where they don't have peace with other people, or where they don't have peace with themselves. We become active in helping them route out these reasons, what it is, why that is, why they're there, and then working things out for peace, even if it costs us. Maybe we have to say we're wrong or take the hit for something when it's not really our fault. And there's times that that's the right thing to do, and there's times that maybe we don't do that. But we have to entertain that possibility. So you know what? You're right. I probably did do so and fill in the blank, and I shouldn't have done that. And maybe that's the case, maybe not. But like, if it's for the pursuit of peace, we need to be willing to take the hit. Maybe be willing to lay down what it is we're upholding for fairness or not. Romans 12 talks about this. Let's go over to Romans 12. Romans 12, verse 17. How do we do this? Well, first, Paul says in verse 17, we repay no one evil for evil We have regard for good things in the sight of all men. And if it's possible, as much as depends on us, live peaceably with all men. So baked in the statement is the fact that it's not always going to be possible to live at peace with all men. And in fact, we will talk next message about why that is. But we try as best we can, as much as it depends on us, to live peaceably with all men. Beloved, do not avenge yourselves, but rather give place to wrath, for it's written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. Therefore, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him a drink, for in doing so, you will heap coals of fire on his head. Don't be overcome with evil, but overcome evil with good. We overcome the conflict, the drama, the things that this world asks us to bring to one another as we compete for the resources, we compete for the glories, we compete for the lust of the flesh, as we compete for whatever it is that there is to compete for or to desire for ourselves. It's asking us, hey, be looking at the higher kingdom, not at the physical. And the higher kingdom is concerned with love, peace, joy, and that sense of welfare for the other. This, as we said, Jesus demonstrated this. He did this so that peace could be extended from heaven towards us. And so as the followers of Jesus, we work and we spend our life to extend goodwill towards others, peace towards others, shalom, wholeness, that sense of fullness towards others. And our job is to take it to them. JC talked a couple weeks ago about how beautiful are the feet of those who bring the gospel. And the gospel is a gospel of peace. We're ambassadors and emissaries of a kingdom of peace, bringing peace and via the good news to those we come in contact with. And for this, it says that we will be called sons of God. This is a man or woman who is able to fit into the family of God, able to be grafted in because they have the same mind and heart as their Father. The heart of the Father and of their Savior Jesus, who desires peace so much for men that he would allow something very dreadfully unfair to be done to him, himself, on behalf of others. This is the attitude that permeates. This is heaven itself, is peace. This is everything that is in kingdom of God. It says that those who come into in Revelation, it says those who, I don't know where, the verse says that those who come into the kingdom essentially will not be those who offend. They will be peacemakers. Jesus says essentially, if you're a peacemaker like me, you will share the term and the name sons of God. The original Son of God says you also, if you are like me in this way, you will also be called sons of God. You will be grafted into that family. You'll be like your Father. All right, let's go to Ephesians 2, verse 13. Paul spent so much of his life warring rather than pursuing peace. When he was Saul, he spent all of his time pursuing and persecuting Christians, those who would literally lay down and die. You recall that as Stephen was dying, he was still pursuing peace. He didn't attack his attackers back as they were stoning him to death for merely speaking. He prayed for their forgiveness. He was still bringing peace even to his murderers as he lay dying. And Paul stood by approving, at the time Saul. But after he met and encountered Jesus, he became a peacemaker. And his goal in life, one of his many goals in life, was to bring peace, and the gospel of peace, and to spread it, and to bring it to all. So Ephesians, with that in mind, Ephesians 2 and verse 13. But now in Christ Jesus, you who were once far off have been brought near by the blood of Christ, for he himself is our peace, who has made both one, has broken down the middle wall of separation, having abolished in his flesh the enmity, that is, the law of commandments contained in ordinances, so as to create in himself one new man from the two, thus making peace. And that he might reconcile them both to God in one body through the cross, thereby putting to death the enmity. And he came and he preached peace to you who are afar off and to those who are near. So I want to propose this. If that is all so, how can the following scripture be true? Jesus says this in Matthew 10. Do not think that I came to bring peace on earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I've come to set a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and a man's enemies will be those in his own household. Kind of doesn't make sense at first, but it will next message. Because we're talking about the last beatitude, which segues beautifully into this. And so next time I get to the opportunity, God willing, we will be talking about the final of the Beatitudes to wrap up this series. As we go out into the world from here, let's endeavor to seek the peace of our families, seek the peace of the little ones who are so quick to war with one another, seek to bring peace in our marriages to one another, to say, I was wrong. Sorry, I won't do that again without any sort of explanation. To bring peace to our friendships, to bring peace to our families, to bring peace to our friends, our communities. This deep-seated peace, the sense of shalom, of wholeness, the peace that only God has, the peace that only God can afford. This is the peace that we bring to others. We can't do it unless we have it in our hearts first. So I would encourage us all to be seeking God's peace this week. If there's something that you're wound up about, please, happy to pray with you afterwards. Anyone on the prayer team, anyone in this church will pray with you if you're wound up about something. If you're worried about something, if something is attacking you and stressing you out, God says you will be given his peace. And I can attest that he is good to give us his peace when we are good to hand it over to him. And so we don't have to understand everything, why we're going through a particular trial maybe, or why it is that so-and-so dislikes us or comes against us. We don't have to worry about those things when we know that we are doing things for the purposes of the gospel and that we are to spread peace anyway. So as we go through this next few weeks, oh man, please let's be pursuing peace and seeing how it is. Let's be proactive in figuring out how we can make that a prominent feature in our life through God's working in us as we seek him for it, but then asking him how we can bring that to others. The people we encounter at the store, the people that we go out, the people that we see and run across every day at work or whatever. It requires being proactive. It requires action. And so that requires getting out of our comfort zone in order to bring peace as best we can. All right, so next time we will talk about what it means for those, blessed are those who are persecuted for my name's sake. We will tie everything up neatly with a bow. And until that time, may God be with you. And let's go ahead and finish up services today with worship hymn.